Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters. My name is Adam Torres, and if you'd like to apply to be a guest on the show, just head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to Apply. All right, so today's guest is Mickey Vanderloo. She's president over at Lakeview Consulting. Mickey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Adam. I appreciate you having me on.
All right. Well, we appreciate you being here, and I think this is a great topic. So talking about how to get capital to support manufacturing investments, and I know you're in the grant space and help with companies that are looking to secure some funding and grants and other things, and we'll go into that and get into the specifics in a moment. But first thing first, how did you get involved in this field? Like, how'd they suck you in?
Oh, well, I'll tell you, Adam, I worked for over 25 years in manufacturing, which dates
What areas?
by the way.
What areas were you in? Like geography?
Basically, yeah, in the Midwest, around the St. Louis area. And
I'm a Michigander, by the way. First time. I'm from Michigan. So that's why I love this topic. I'm like, it's near and dear to my heart. Go ahead. I'm excited.
Exactly. When I was working in manufacturing, I intersected with grants, in a number of my different jobs. And in one particular job, I helped manufacturers write training grants, got very familiar with economic development grants, and then I got hired by one of my clients when I was working that job, and then I helped that client, which was a steel service center in southwestern Illinois. I helped them get a large grant, and I just discovered when I was doing that, I was like, man, I like doing this. I always had kind of a passion. My degree's in industrial engineering. But my passion was really with writing. I really loved to write. And so it kind of combined my technical expertise with my passion. And so I just wrote this grant and I got them $600,000. And then over the 2-year period of the grant, it was during the 2008-2009 timeframe when, very similar to COVID last year, the country was going through the recession. And so as with COVID, the federal government decided to give money to the states. During COVID, it was called ARPA. During that period of time, it was called ARRA, American Recovery and Reinvestment Act. And it gave money to the states to promote energy types of initiatives in the state. In the state of Illinois, if you've ever been in northern Illinois, there's a lot of wind turbines. There's a lot of wind turbine farms up there. They have what they call good wind. So the state of Illinois decided to really expand that technology in the state. And so our company provided coil and sheet steel that could go into wind turbines. So I applied for $600,000 in funding to expand our capacity to be able to produce those parts. And over the 2-year period of that grant, it expanded to $2.3 million for a number of reasons. A lot of companies that had received funding went under because of the recession. And so we just got opportunity after opportunity to increase that grant size. So we got about $3 million worth of equipment for $2.3 million. And that made my company's leadership pretty happy. And so, but the one thing I started to realize, both in working at those companies and in just doing this grant work, is if I wasn't there to find the grants and write the grants, these companies wouldn't be doing it. Because a lot of manufacturers don't know where to look for grants and they don't have the time to look for them. And they definitely don't have the time or the expertise to write the grants. They don't, they don't understand that whole world. So I decided to start a business that way. And so I said, okay, I'm going to be the person that goes into these companies. And that was back in 2013. And I ran it as a side hustle for a long time. I incorporated in 2014. And so we've been in business for 10 years this September. I now have
congratulations. That's a big milestone.
Thank you.
Come on,
that is a big milestone.
Out there unite. That's amazing.
Exactly. And so I now have 4 employees too. So I have a project manager, I have 2 writers and a researcher. I don't write the grants anymore. What my passion currently is actually going out and doing podcasts, speaking to manufacturers. I speak at a number of different manufacturing conferences, and my goal is just to get the word out about grants to manufacturers and assure them that there's help out there to help them get that funding.
Wow. And so I want to go back to this thought process of what you said on why you started the business, that if somebody's not writing these grants, doing the research, like it's a whole business of really to secure this funding. Like it's not like you're going to just randomly stumble upon it. Maybe you get lucky, but you got to kind of take the luck out of this. When I'm thinking about my own life, I can think about like in college, like this is almost like college, but the grown up version of college when it comes to grants, I mean, very specifically. So like, I remember after I was in college or even as I was leaving, and when other students or other people are like, oh, you should have applied for grants or you should have did this, should have did that. And I'm like, well, I didn't even know that existed. Like, how did you find a grant? Like what? And this is going back quite some time. So it's like, it's not like I was like, how was I supposed to know about this grant? Like really. And so if I think about all of that money that was out there, especially when I was going to school, there happened to be a lot of money that was being funded by a lot of different people for grants, but I just didn't know. So this is like the adult version of that. Like what you don't know can really hurt you. Am I off on that, by the way? Like, is my analogy like totally off? If it is, you can tell me. Does that make sense?
That makes a lot of sense, and that's absolutely true, Adam. And what I always tell people is when I worked in manufacturing, my employers never liked leaving money on the table. They never liked it. And therefore...
And let's clarify one quick thing, just because for some people that are listening. Grant versus loan, you're talking about grants. I don't want to assume for somebody that's never received a grant, like that doesn't even, like, let's define what that means, because when you say these amounts of money, I didn't know. I'm sitting here like, what?
So the biggest difference and the main difference between a grant and a loan, everybody knows that a loan has to be paid back, and with interest usually. A grant, on the other hand, does not have to be paid back. So if you meet the terms of the grant, let's just say you're applying for a training grant and you're going to train 10 people in leadership development. Maybe the cost of the training is about $30,000. Most training grants will pay for half of the cost. So you would apply for the grant, you would get approved for the grant. If you get approved for the grant, then you conduct the training, and then most grants are on a reimbursement basis. So you have to do the training, and then they send you a check for $15,000. So it is literally a check that goes to you. It is income, by the way. It can be taxed, but, regardless, you've saved half that cost of training. So
when you said leaving money on the table, you're talking actual money.
Right. I'm talking actual money. Yeah. That's what I tell manufacturers. I'm like, if you learn about grants, if I'm telling you about grants and you're like, this just doesn't resonate with me, I don't want to do this, that's completely up to you. But if you don't know that these things are out there, you are truly leaving money on the table and you don't even know it. So that's a lot of my parts of my presentation go around the fact that if you know that these things exist, a lot of our work is in the front end of the grant. So it's the research into grant opportunities and the writing of the grants. That's what our expertise is in. And so we do a lot of that research. We do a lot of research for companies because putting the wealth of grants that are out there for their specific situation can be very valuable for them. Yeah.
So workforce development and growth, or even manufacturing investments like reshoring, like what are some of the, give me some of the themes, like what kind of grants or what kind of things are there out there that are available, just so people, and based off of what I've read, just before you kind of answer this, I mean, your team, correct me if I'm off on this, you've obtained over $150 million in grant funding. So when you say these things are out there, you're not guessing, like whether somebody's going to get it or not. Obviously they have to qualify, they have to, go through whatever the processes are, but is that money there? I mean, you've already gotten $150 million for people in your career, and you and your team.
Right, exactly. So yeah, what I tell people is grants fund economic development efforts in general. So most of the funding for manufacturers comes from the state that manufacturer is located in. If a manufacturer has several different facilities in several different states, each of those facilities could potentially qualify for grants from the state they're in. So it's a huge benefit for multi-location companies for sure. So the general themes are related to economic development: job growth, investment, recycling, so reduction of greenhouse or reduction of landfill, sending things to landfill, training, so upskilling people is an economic development benefit, and then research and development and capital investment. So facility investment, capital investment can all be incentivized by grants. Reshoring is a unique type of, so the federal government has decided to not really specifically have what are quote unquote reshoring grants. What the federal government has chosen to do is they've taken the vulnerable supply chain areas, electric vehicles, semiconductor chips, medical supplies right after COVID, and they've chosen to incentivize the building of facilities and huge investments in capital. They decided to incentivize those in those industries. So there aren't what I would call specifically reshoring grants. They're typically called manufacturing modernization grants. There are a couple states that offer what are called manufacturing readiness grants or Industry 4.0 grants. And those can fund equipment. Those can fund a portion of an equipment cost. Some are, in the $50,000 range, and in Indiana, there's one that's $250,000. It's called the Manufacturing Readiness Grant. So there are a few states that offer equipment grants, but what I tell my clients is that if you have a project, let's just say you're going to be investing in equipment, well, you're likely going to need to do some training. You might be needing to, invest in software to run the equipment. You're going to obviously purchase the equipment. You might have some engineering costs. What I try to get my clients to do is tell us specifically what they're going to be doing as part of these projects, and then we find different grants that can address those different areas. So if there's training that goes with that equipment purchase, that portion of the project can be segregated out and we can apply for a training grant. So it's a very additive process. It's a very, it's really working with the clients to get them to specifically identify costs associated with certain activities. And then once we can find those activities, we can go out and look for grants to offset the cost of those activities.
So why don't people, when I'm listening to this, if I'm in manufacturing and otherwise, why aren't people receptive to this? Like you mentioned, if somebody doesn't want to participate, doesn't want to what would be the reason why someone would want, I don't want to be rude, but why would they want to leave money on the table? I'm just a little confused on that.
Sure. Yeah. What it is a lot of times is they just don't know. They don't know what's out there. And so they're not really aware. But sometimes, there are some companies, and most of them are private companies. Some don't want to share their financials. And you do often have to share some sort of financials in order to apply for a grant. Some people just don't see that there's enough of a return to put in the time. Even though we shepherd our clients through this process, they don't even want to spend that amount of time. But what I tell people is that you can't make that decision until you know what's out there. I don't think you can make a really informed decision until you know what's out there. And then you can say, okay, for these grants, that's too much information. I don't want to give that amount of information, or I don't think $15,000 or $20,000 is worth my time. Again, what I tell them is, okay, it might be $15,000 or $20,000, but that frees up that amount of money in your budget to go do something else. And I'm pretty sure that if I handed you a check right now for $15,000, you wouldn't turn it down. So I try to get them to think about it in terms of it's time well spent. And working with us, they don't have to spend that much time. If they went out and did this, it would take them much longer to go find the grants. And then they would kind of struggle probably with applying for the grants. Whereas if they hire us to go find grants for them, we present them those grants, we collect the information we need, we write the applications. They aren't spending much time to do it, and they're still getting the $15,000. So to me, I don't get a lot of clients that say I'm not interested, but when I've heard that before, usually those are the reasons.
I could see the financials part, being just depending on the size and this and that. I get that piece of it.
Right.
And then I get some of these other ones, but I can see some of the arguments there that you made, but on the other side of this, I guess you don't know until you try aspect of it, the amounts that you mentioned in terms of what happened over COVID with that. Now, obviously that was a large one that you secured there, but going into that, they didn't know that grant was going to get bigger, you didn't know. So it's it also seems and this is the part that is super interesting to me, is that once they've worked with you, you already know their strong suits. So now and you're on the lookout. So if something else comes up and they've already worked with you, of course you're going to want to get them more money. Right. And other programs and other things, that's what you're doing anyway. So now you all who wouldn't want somebody that's on your, so even though something may be what X amount right now that might not have been worth their time, even for your
Right.
team, just to have them on their radar and to be trained
Right.
for what's coming up next, to be like, oh, you know who applied so and so? That's the one that'll go for that. We need to reach out to them. Like that
Right.
alone to
Right.
me is like, to know that you have somebody out there working for you because it's in their best interest as well. Like you're aligned, right? The interests are
Right.
aligned. So it's a win-win.
Right. Right.
Yeah. This is a great story. I love it. I love it. It's a great idea. I'm like, I don't have anything in manufacturing. I'm like, is there some media grants out there? What's going on? I know you do. Got me all jealous over here. I understand. It's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Mickey, this has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate the conversation. I appreciate getting to know a little bit more about what you do, and obviously, the great work you're doing to help your clients
Sure.
secure funding. That being said, if somebody's listening to this or watching this and they want to follow up, I know we only barely, scratched the surface on the topic. I know there's so much
Sure.
more. How do they connect with you and your team?
Sure. The best way to connect with me is by email. My email is Mickey, Micki, at lakeviewconsulting.net. You can also go to my website, lakeviewconsulting.net. You can see the services that we provide, and I have articles all about manufacturing grants. There's tons of articles. There's tons of resources on there. I'm pretty sure you're going to link to my website in the show notes. So, just follow that link otherwise in the show notes. And also, I am speaking at a few conferences coming up. In October, I'm speaking at Spring World in Chicago. I'm speaking at FabTech in Orlando. And I'm also speaking at the Industrial Heat Decarbonization Summit in Indianapolis, all on manufacturing grants. So if any of your listeners are looking for a speaker or want me to do a webinar for their team on manufacturing grants, I'm always happy to just do those things to get the word out.
Amazing. And we'll put your information, of course, in the show notes so that the audience can just click on the links, head right on over, check out what you're up to, and connect with you as well. That being said, speaking of the audience, if this is your first time with Mission Matters and you haven't done it yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. Hit that subscribe button. We have many more mission-based individuals coming up. We don't want you to miss a thing. This is a daily show each and every day. We have new guests for you that we're bringing on. And again, we don't want you to miss anything. So definitely hit that subscribe button. And Mickey, thank you again so much for coming on. This has been fun.
Thank you, Adam. It has been fun.